What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me here on episode 30 of the 90 Feet from Home Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We are presented by Underdog Fantasy, and I'm your host, Joe Orico. You guys can check me out over on Twitter at Joe Orico99. That's where I'm sharing out all of my new work, podcasts, articles, notes that go out directly onto Twitter. You can check all that out at Joe Orico99. Our second episode of the day, we are joined by a good friend, somebody that I've had on many shows. He's been a staple of my trade deadline shows over the last couple of years. I've got to hang out with him in person at First Pitch Arizona. A lot of fun, always talking with Eric Cross. You can check him out on Twitter at EricCross04, hosting the Toolshed Pod, doing work at FTN, at RotoBaller. Very busy man, Eric. I'm appreciative of you taking the time to join me today. And I think congratulations are in order, as much as it pains me to say. There's another Boston Sports Championship for you to be celebrating. So congratulations, my friend, and welcome to the show.
Man, thanks, Joe. Always a pleasure talking with you. And yeah, it was a long 5.5 years between championships here in Boston. Now I'm gonna piss off half your listeners right now, but that's someone mentioned that to me. Like, oh, it's been a long time since the. I forget which one was last. It was the Red Sox or the Patriots, but I think it was the Patriots. But yeah, hopefully the Red Sox can get back into it here soon. And but hey, we got a lot of fun players to talk about today. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. I saw some kid with a poster recently. I wanted to smack the guy. He's like, "Oh, I've seen 13 parades and I'm 17 years old." It's like, are you kidding me?
My favorite, I think I've seen something like that. My favorite was, I think it was it was between like the Patriots and the Red Sox. So yeah, so Sox won it in October of 2018, and the Patriots were that January of 19. And there was a like one of those digital billboards in Boston. It said "End the drought," like 86 days or something like that. I saw a picture of that and I started laughing so incredibly hard. I'm like, people are gonna freaking hate us for this stuff. We gotta stop doing this. But
You guys have had
it's all in good fun.
you guys have had a pretty nice couple decades there. All four sports teams, I think, have multiple titles.
Yep. So yeah, the Patriots got 6, Sox got the 4, Celtics got 2. Actually, I think the Bruins just have 1, but I'm not like a huge hockey guy. But yeah, I know I've been spoiled as a 33-year-old Boston sports fan. Didn't have to, the Red Sox broke the curse when I was 14. Patriots were terrible before I was born. So I didn't really have to, I did miss out on the Bird and McHale Celtics, but didn't really have to endure a lot of heartbreak. And I know that. I fully admit that.
Hey, you know what? I'm happy for you. It's good to see. At least somebody can be happy. Not here in Toronto. I've seen one parade. It was the Raptors in 2019. It was very exciting, but not expecting it for my Blue Jays or Maple Leafs anytime soon. Eric, I did say off the top what you got going on, Toolshed, FTN, RotoBaller, but anything in particular you want to plug, upcoming podcasts or articles that the people should know about?
Yeah. I mean, I just pumped out all my recent prospect and dynasty rankings updates, and I do the one prospect set and then dynasty, both average and OBP focused. I have some rest of season rankings for redraft outs, probably later this week on Friday. And gonna be starting a little series on RotoBaller here, kind of going position by position with some dynasty buy and sells, and I'll throw some positional prospect and dynasty rankings in for each spot, kind of just looking at the state of each position because as you know, Joe, it's been a pretty interesting season. Seen a lot of value shifts one way or another, both good and bad. And everything's going to jumble from where it was even 3 months ago before the season started. So that'll be a lot of fun. Probably doing that over the next 2 weeks or so.
Eric does great work. You guys should definitely be checking him out, specifically if you are dynasty prospect focused. But any baseball, fantasy baseball fans, definitely make sure you're keeping track of what Eric's got going on. It's been a crazy season, like you said. If we were to redraft today, I think you can completely tear up the ADPs and everything we were looking at before the season and kind of start over. Nearly 50%. I think technically it's like we're 45% of the way through the season, the time of recording here. What have been your big takeaways? Is it the lack of offense? Is it something else? What is it exactly that stood out to you more than anything through 2024?
I feel like all the big name prospects so far, for the most part, have been struggling. And I think that just shows that baseball is so unpredictable. I mean, like you look at like WRC plus leaders for rookies, and this was a couple weeks ago. It was I think it was like Davis Schneider, Wilyer Abreu, and I forget who the third one was. And then you got like way down the list. Like, oh look, there's like Langford and Chourio and Evan Carter and all those big names. That baseball, you have to really be prepared for anything. I think out of all the major sports, I mean, like every other sport, like in basketball, like like all right, LeBron James isn't gonna all of a sudden average 12 points a game, or in hockey, like Crosby wasn't all of a sudden gonna be terrible. It's like you knew the studs were gonna be studs. Even this year, we have Corbin Carroll, who's went from being a top 3, 4, 5 pick to being to the point where it was like almost like, do we drop this guy in redraft? Like, you know, many questions I had to answer about that, and even got me thinking. I'm like, man, when is that point? Or even Rodriguez has picked it up. Julio was pretty lackluster, for a bit now, and Michael Harris, and then list goes on and on. Austin Riley until recently, and I hate to say it, but both Vlad and Vlad's kind of picked it up, but Bo especially, he's been obviously hurt now, but he's been having a really down season, so it just shows like even you can do all the prep in the world. Like you can like I know who to take here, and it just goes off the wall on you. You gotta be prepared to shift quickly, especially in redraft. Like Dynasty, you can kind of build it out long term and make those types of deals. But redraft, like you gotta think quick or you're gonna fall out of contention pretty quickly. So yeah, this is like one of the crazier fantasy season I can remember. I mean, we've had some stuff like this before, but to this level and add on all the pitching injuries, which have also at the same time silver lining. We've seen guys like off the top of my head, Luis Heel that probably wouldn't have had a chance to without the the Garrett Cole injury. Guys that have kind of broken out that maybe wouldn't have had that chance to break out if it wasn't for a few injuries in their rotation. So yeah, it's just been crazy. Even all my DC teams on NFBC are just like the bench is just filled 80% of just injured guys. It's been crazy, but like you said, it's we're almost halfway there, and hopefully we get some more guys back soon.
Yeah, well, we're getting Garrett Cole and Max Scherzer back this week, which is kind of nice.
Finally,
Just a
yeah,
little bit refreshing. Even as a Jays fan, I don't love to see the Yankees getting reinforcements, but it's nice to see pitchers being added back into the
yep,
pool in a year where even go back to last year, we lost McClanahan and Sandy. It's nice to see some all-star / Hall of Fame level talent re-entering the pool, even if it's not like on the waiver pool, just back there in your lineup. So it was nice to put Max Scherzer in a lineup this week.
yep.
My decision was in a DC. It was the first pitch Arizona DC, and I could choose either John Gray or Max Scherzer for the week, and I went with Scherzer. Thank God. After seeing what happened to John Gray yesterday, 9 earned runs. I was pretty happy with that decision. Even if I don't get the Scherzer start this week, I'll still take it. But I feel like this is a season where there was no real strategy that really paid off for you. Fade these guys. Fade the injury risks. Okay, Glass now and Sale are looking like they're going to be competing for the Cy Young. O'Neal Cruz and Jazz Chisholm are healthy, knock on wood. And the guys that were kind of safe have not been the safe ones. Garrett Cole was touted throughout all of draft season as one of the safer pitchers, even though he was kind of a little bit in decline. Even last year, like the strikeout rate was a little bit down, whatever. But every single like common strategy that we usually throw out there didn't seem to work this year. Stack your hitters early. Well, okay, what if you drafted Corbin Carroll and Austin Riley in the first 2 rounds? Or all those usual strategies just seem to go by the wayside, and it just kind of makes you wonder, like, why are we doing this? It just seems to be
Right.
random. You might as well just throw darts at the board, and maybe you end up with a Ranger Suarez or something like that just changes your season. I've never felt the randomness more, even in a roto standpoint, than I have in this season for sure. This feels like you can't predict anything.
Absolutely. I mean, if you had started out like picking maybe in the 4 spot or something like that, 4 or 5 spot, and started out with a stack of like two you just mentioned, Carroll and Austin Riley, I would have been very happy with that. I
Yeah.
mean, you got obviously the power speed from Carroll, you got plenty of power from Riley, who'd become one of the top power hitters in the game and gotten the average up there. Like, all right, there's probably 60 combined home runs. You probably get 40 plus steals from Corbin Carroll, and you probably get between the two of them pretty solid average. Good amount of counting stats as well. Given in the lineups they're in and the spot in the lineup that they're in. So and then you sit here where, I mean, yeah, Riley's gotten hot recently, like this week,
Yeah.
and that's great. And then Corbin Carroll has, I think, still 2 home runs, which I think we're at in Coors and in Great American Ballpark. And I think he just got over the Mendoza line a week ago. So, yeah, it's been, and I had some Carroll shares. I had some Garrett Cole shares, which I usually don't go that early on pitcher, but this year I did a little bit. But luckily, I do have some Tanner Houck shares as well, some Ranger Suarez shares, some Garrett Crochet shares. So luckily, some of those have helped kind of ease the pain and the bleeding a little bit from these early round injured guys and the early round disappointments.
Yeah, I got to shout out your guy there at FTN, our mutual friend Vlad Sedler, who I didn't see anybody really talking about Crochet as much as I did with Vlad, and he ranked him kind of aggressively back when we
Yep.
thought he was going to be the closer in Chicago, and then it turns out we're getting somebody who, if the season ended today, might win the Cy Young in the American League for the 17-win White Sox. So, crazy call there by Vlad.
For sure.
I don't know if he was expecting it to go this well, but I'm sure he'll take it, and I have a bunch of shares because of him. So shout out there to the Roto Gut. Let's start talking about some of these players. We brought on Eric, of course, to talk about rookies / prospects. I'm still not 100% sure what I'm going to title the show, but we are going to talk about a group of guys who have either debuted. Some of them haven't debuted yet, but generally we're talking about some young guys, and we're going to see what we think is going to happen going forward. We're going to start off with Wyatt Langford. It's been a little bit better as of late. He's actually been stealing some bases. This 98th percentile sprint speed or 99th percentile sprint speed that led to like 2 stolen bases for the first half of the season. It's kind of frustrating, but he seems to be a little bit better since he's come back. I'm kind of optimistic that, he will turn things around in the second half. But to your point, it's been kind of a rough showing for all of these top prospects this season. What is your thought process on Wyatt Langford? Is the power going to show up? Is he somebody who's worth buying low on right now in redraft? I feel like in Dynasty, it's a great time to buy low, but what are your thoughts on Wyatt Langford as a whole?
Yeah, definitely not what I expected and what everybody expected from Langford. And I was, as everyone that follows me knows, very, very in on this guy. Like, I had him as my no doubt number one, prospect for fantasy purposes. And and I was very high on Caminero, Holliday, Chourio, and all of them. But just given the fact that what you saw from Langford both in college and then last year in the minor leagues, where he was on just like really a historic kind of pace what he was doing across the board. You thought, all right, this is the type of guy that will come in. Like, he has all the skills. He has the approach at the plate, doesn't strike out much, hits the ball hard. Can walk. He's good on the base pass. Guy that you'd figure would be, a player that would transition more seamlessly than either like a Chourio, who's been a bit more aggressive, has had some strikeout concerns throughout his minor league career. And Chourio's had, we'll talk about him in a little bit and had his struggles, but Langford's metrics have not been terrible. I mean, obviously you're looking at the slash line and it's disappointing. And he was getting up inside the top 100, inside the top 75 in some of those later, mid to late March drafts. So anybody that invested, that capital in him obviously is disappointed. But I'm still holding out hope. I still like the metrics again aren't terrible. They're not great either. But he's right around like middle of the road, league average or so quality of contact metrics. So like you mentioned, the sprint speed is there, in the new bat speed metric that everyone loves. He's in the top 20% of that as well. So I think he's one of the few hitters that are in the top 20% of both bat speed and sprint speed. And yeah, he's so the other. I just kind of pulled it up. The other names: top 20% for bat speed and sprint speed. Bobby Witt Jr., O'Neill Cruz, Joey Cruz, Corbin Carroll still up in there. Ellie, Gunnar, Real Muto. Then you got some like Luke Raley, Matt Chapman, Joe Adell kind of randomly in there, but still a lot of good names and only about 12 names total. So yeah, I'm holding out hope. Definitely a buy low anywhere. And if you play in redraft leagues that have trades, I know some platforms do. And I would definitely be looking to buy low anywhere because at least he's giving you some speed right now. That helps. And still waiting for that first over the fence home run. He's got that one inside the park home run. But, the metrics didn't lie. In college, they were like, better than very good. They were elite metrics. And same thing in the minor leagues. And I'm definitely a believer in that. So I think he's going to get it going here pretty soon. The Rangers are still sticking with him, starting him regularly. So that kind of shows that they have the confidence in him as well. So, yeah, I do think you're going to be in store for a much better second half from Wyatt Langford.
My Wi-Fi dropped out there for a second. I don't think it impacted what you were saying. I think you remained, and I just popped out there for a second, Eric. But yeah, Wyatt Langford. I don't think anybody would have thought to this point, even though it's only been 48 games, that he wouldn't have left the yard yet. I mean,
Right.
he has the home run, but it's an inside the park home run. Things have been brutal, but he's not getting overwhelmed in terms of strikeouts. He's walking nearly 8% of the time, like league average strikeout and walk rates. I'd like to see some more barrels out of him, but it's hard to think that he won't start to improve. And maybe part of it, we're a little bit too bullish because of the fact that Corbin Carroll and Julio and Bobby Witt all kind of hit, like this previous group of top prospects, that was a pretty high hit rate. I think that kind of ruined our expectations in general for these guys, that we expect them all to be first rounders now.
Oh, absolutely, and yeah, I've said that in the past too. Even go back a little bit further with like the Juan Soto, he burst onto the scene. We've had so many, Tatis. Like, we've had so many guys over the last 5 years or so that have become elite superstars, really right off the bat. And so you see like the top, dynasty rankings. A lot of guys are 23, 24, 25 years old, so they've already ascended to that rank. And even when I was, growing up, you'd have, a guy here and there, but not as kind of frequently as we see now, where we see elite young players and not waiting until 26, 27, 28 to be kind of, the elite and ascend to the top player in the game. You're seeing that so frequently now that we have gotten spoiled, and we have kind of started having these unrealistic expectations of, hey, this guy was tearing it up in college, was tearing it up in the minors. Langford, perfect example of that. And he's just got continued tearing it up. Then it shows like how difficult this game is, and that these hitters are now facing the best pitching in the world. It doesn't matter. I don't care who you're facing, even the top pitching prospect like Cade Horton or Jackson Jobe. Now all of a sudden he's facing Garrett Crochet. He's facing Tariq Skubal. He's facing Garrett Cole. He's facing Spencer Strider. Like, these guys are the best pitchers in the world for a reason, and it shows that baseball is very hard. But again, I'm still a believer in Langford, but I think we do have to adjust expectations a bit. And even me, like, I go a little prospect light in my drafts, unless it's someone I'm like all in on. Like last year it was Carroll. Hey, it worked out. This year Langford was that guy, not so much. So that shows that's just such, for lack of a better term, it's kind of a crapshoot, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, we can call it. It's a shit show. We can.
Yeah.
Another guy who could qualify in that same type of category, I think, is Jackson Holliday. Depending on which list you looked at, you might have seen Jackson Holliday at the top of a lot of lists, really. A lot of people were very interested in Holliday, considering the pedigree, considering the talent he showed, the way he progressed up the minors through, like, it took him like all of 5 minutes to make his way to the big leagues, but 50% strikeout rate through his small sample size of the big leagues, got sent down. Now he's on the minor league IL with an elbow issue. There's a lot of people still holding Jackson Holliday, myself included, in a couple of leagues. They're more deep, like 15-team NFBC style leagues. But is it time that we just kind of move on and say this maybe isn't Jackson Holliday's year? Hope to reset in 2025?
I think it is. I mean, it'd be different if he was, on most any other team for the most part, besides the loaded Baltimore. And Baltimore's still rolling out, Ramon Arias pretty regularly. Mateo's getting in there a lot, and they've been doing fine. It's not like they've been terrible, either one of them. And obviously they have other guys that are trying to get in, Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad, Connor Norby. So it's not just Holliday that's trying to break in full time to this lineup. And, for the most part, all of them besides Mayo have gotten at least a little shot here. But yeah, Holliday, even if I did think he was maybe rushed a little bit, even with how advanced he is. I mean, Baseball America gave out 2 70-grade hit tools this year, and Holliday was one of them. And so, but I don't think anybody, even the biggest Holliday skeptic, could have thought he'd strike out in half of his plate appearances. And yeah, it was 34 plate appearances, but this is one of the more advanced hitting prospects we've ever seen over the last, decade or so. Guy that you thought could, challenge for batting titles and hit 300 plus annually. And I don't think that player is gone. And I think to his benefit, he has a, near Hall of Fame caliber father to kind of rely on and pick his brain and then work with him. And obviously his little brother, who's I think 17 now and getting into the minors pretty soon here. So it's like obviously a baseball family. They can kind of bounce ideas off each other and then like, hey, try this, or hey, you're doing this. So I think he's got definitely the great support system, and obviously the phenomenal Baltimore Orioles player development team to help him. So Holliday, I'm not worried about, but for this year, yeah, I don't think the fact that he's on the IL right now, and maybe he can back up in September for a cup of coffee, but I don't think you're going to see that impact you're looking for fantasy purposes until probably next year. And I still believe in him. So if you want to target him next year, I definitely would get behind that. But yeah, I think it's starting to get a little glim for this year.
Yeah, at this point, there's no real reason for them to rock the boat in Baltimore.
Right.
It's like even if he is healthy, like you said, he comes back. Maybe you get a few weeks, or maybe you get even like 6 weeks potentially. But they've, I don't know. I just don't know if it's really worth it, especially if you are in like a 10 or a 12 team league. He's more than 40% owned still on Yahoo. It just seems a little bit high for, especially for like if you're in a 15 teamer and you're holding out hope because there's nothing else out there. I can kind of understand that. I'm in that boat myself. But if you're in a 10 or a 12 team league, unless you have dedicated minor league spots where it's not hurting you. But even then, I feel like there's better stashes, guys, we're going to talk about later today. So I just don't really know if it's going to be worth it. Unfortunately, I drafted a bunch of them, but I think it's time where you just kind of have to move on for this season. But if you're talking dynasty, I'm sure the price in dynasty leagues is a little bit cheaper than it would have been 3 months ago. So it might be time to throw in an offer there on Holliday.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about somebody who has been one of my favorite players recently. It's kind of odd, a division rival player, but he's taken my heart. Ceddanne Rafaela. And my God, he's been really just incredible from a fantasy point of view. I don't think really the average person even realizes, but he's closing in on like a top 50 player for the season. He's been batting ninth almost exclusively for the Red Sox, and he's 22nd in the league in runs and 15th in RBI in the American League. He has 8 homers and 9 stolen bases. Yeah, he's striking out too much. He doesn't walk enough. Sure. But this guy's a rookie. I mean, he's doing incredible things, and I think that the sky's the limit for Rafaela. I threw a couple bucks on him. I mentioned it on the show yesterday in a rookie of the league bet at like plus 7,000 or something. It's like seems like there's a decent chance he comes away with the award. I love him. I know you're a Red Sox fan, so I'm sure you've been liking what you've been seeing as well, Eric.
Oh, absolutely. He is one of the more fun players to watch, and I had the privilege of seeing him a lot when he came through Double A Portland, as it's 15 minutes from my house. I go to obviously a ton of games here every year, and he is definitely the type of guy that I knew Boston fans would just fall in love with instantly. That huge defensive center field impact that he makes, that he can he can hit some home runs, he can cause havoc on the base pass. Just does a lot of fun stuff and a lot of stuff that we love in fantasy as well. And yeah, it's weird that he's got he's on pace for like 80 runs and 86, 87 RBI or something like that while hitting. He said eighth, ninth primarily this year, and given his lower OBP and average, it's kind of weird to see those numbers correlate with the slash on he has. And you look at the profile, it's been you dig down, it's been a mixed bag. You got a lot of good, you got some bad as well. But the one thing I always was kind of questioning, and many did, was his aggressiveness. He's a guy that would have high chase rates in the minor leagues, low walk rates, and that's kind of carried over. This year we're looking at a 3.7% walk rate and a chase rate of 43.4%, which is 15% higher than league average. But at the same time, he had the contact skills, at least in minors, to make it work. This year, they kind of have not been there to the level that we saw from him, in Double A, Triple A, but he's still making the most of it. So you just wonder, like, maybe as the year progresses, he's been hitting much better, over the last 4, 5, 6 weeks or so. We maybe see him be a little bit more passive, making more contact like he did in the minor leagues. That this could only go up. And I always kind of thought he could get into 20 home runs. He's not a huge power guy by any means, but he can get to that pull side pop. And at Fenway, that's going to work. I mean, 7 of his 8 home runs so far have been pulled. He had one random one to right field, but he's a lot of extra base hits off the monster, over the monster. So he can really get to that pull side pop, and obviously a phenomenal athlete. And so imagine if he can get up to like, even a 300, 310 OBP, which is not asking much, just how many more steals he could have, where the legit upside for him is like a 20 homer, 25 steal guy. And even if it's with a 240, 250 average and a lower OBP, you still, you'll probably get again, 80 plus, runs in RBI. So he'll provide enough to kind of offset the lower average and OBP. But yeah, he's been really fun to watch. He's really swinging the bat well of late. So I think it's only going to go up from here, and maybe end the year. I mean, he's already on a damn near 2020 pace as it is right now. So I think he can get right up into that area or even exceed it by the end of the year.
And the thing is, like, they're starting to catch up now. I look a lot at Yahoo roster rates, and he was 41% as of like a few days ago. He's up to 57 now, but shortstop, outfield eligible, doing what he's
Yep.
doing. I just recorded a show with Sarah Sanchez and Shelly Veristrate, and they were saying like that's a perfect Mookie Betts replacement if you need one right now with the same
Yeah.
type of eligibility. it's not going to be Mookie Betts, but over the last month, Rafaela has been a hell of a lot better than Mookie. Obviously, that's not something you can expect every month, but Rafaela over the last month is like a top 20 player. If he ever moves up in that order, I think we could see some crazy things. And I also think like his BABIP could go up a little bit considering the speed. It's at 306. He was usually running some higher numbers in the minor league, so there is a little bit of room for that batting average and on base to go up. And if you look at any rest of season projections, Steamer, the Bat, Zips, whatever, they all expect a better batting average and on base as well. So this might just be the beginning, considering as well. I mentioned it in the tweet I sent out yesterday, but like he was looking pretty rough to start the season. He was batting like a $186 through April. The fact that he is here through not even half the season, like a top 100 easily, probably a top 75 player, regardless of format. It's pretty damn impressive. Pretty damn impressive stuff from Rafaela. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you mentioned like there's some leagues where I drafted him, or obviously others did, and then he was dropped in a lot of leagues. Like early part of May, where he was batting $160, $170, whatever it was, and maybe this isn't gonna work out, and then shortly after that he started really ticking up and getting some steals, getting on base a little more. So yeah, he's been, anybody that has had him, or David Hamilton recently too, has been really fun. Obviously he's hurt right now, but yeah, those two have been really waiver wire godsends over the last 6 weeks or so.
Watching Sunday Night Baseball, I think you and I might have been able to get a bag off of Trevino there. Everybody was stealing bases. I think Hamilton had 4, Rafaela had 1 or 2, Duran, like those guys were running wild. And I got to say, it was a lot of fun. It was a very fun broadcast. I'm sure the Yankees fans weren't too crazy about the whole, I'm not sure if you saw the Tristan Casas interview.
Yeah.
They kind of let him take over ESPN there for a few minutes.
I love Casas.
He's such a character. He's like Greinke. He's the new Greinke, somebody called it. And I think it's completely correct.
No, that is, yeah, I like that. And Greinke's a guy that I didn't like when he was younger, but he really grew on me. Like 20s Greinke, I wasn't a fan of. 30s Greinke, I freaking loved this. I was like, this guy just doesn't care. He's out there, having fun, just doing his thing. He doesn't give a crap what everybody thinks. And Casas just has that entertainer mentality. And obviously, he's pretty damn good at baseball too. So I have a lot of shares of him, both redraft and dynasty. So really hoping he's going to come back here soon. He's getting closer, but. Yeah, that was a really fun broadcast. I love when they do stuff like that. Kind of spices it up a little bit.
Yeah, I know the Yankees fans weren't too happy about it, but they can get over themselves for a few minutes. Let's talk about Jasson Chourio. He was somebody who got off to a really nice start, really cooled off, and even though it's been kind of a shaky rookie season as a whole, where he's been moved down the order, and now there was a time where he wasn't even playing every single day, we're still looking at a decent line here. 7 homers, 8 stolen bases, 25 runs, 24 ribbies. I get a lot of questions about Chourio. Is he worth holding on to in a 3 outfielder league? Should I drop him in my 12-teamer? Generally, I'm holding on, but it's starting to get to a point where it's like, okay, bottom of the order. He's not giving you a ton of production. I think it's justified in moving on, but I'm curious what you have to think, because you definitely focus on prospects a hell of a lot more than I do. And Chourio is somebody that, even though like I know a decent bit about, I feel like there's still more that I can learn about Chourio.
Yeah, the fact that he's still only 20 years old, I think people have to remember that. And it's funny too, the fact that we were just talking about Ceddanne Rafaela. Like, if you look at just their sliders, I know sliders aren't everything on Savant, but just for point of reference, you look at their sliders and just took out the bat speed one, they're pretty damn similar. Like, you can put them side by side, and people guess, and people would probably guess wrong for the most part. But Chourio had, again, similar skill set. I think more amplified, because obviously he has more raw power than Rafaela does, higher upside overall. But somewhere where it's an aggressive approach that has gotten him in trouble in the minor leagues. And obviously he had phenomenal numbers for the most part, but kind of, for the most part, struggled a little bit at every level, and then kind of picked it up as he got more, acclimated to the level. So I thought that would kind of happen in the major leagues, not to this level. He's actually got pretty similar, slash line to Rafaela, with similar home runs and RBI, or home runs and steals, 7 home runs, 8 steals, and 215 plate appearances. So if you kind of, times that by 3, get you about 650 plate appearances, that's still 21 and 24. It's almost kind of like Volpe last year, where it was a low average, but still went 20-20. I'm still, a believer in Chourio. I do wonder if the average is always going to be a bit on the lower side, but could he turn into, a guy that's 240, 250, going 20 plus? Maybe he's, like a Randy Arozarena type at some point. I think that's definitely possible. Maybe not a Rosario from this year. That's been kind of rough,
Let's hope not.
but he's getting going a little bit lately. But yeah. So Chourio, I mean, he's not even playing full time right now. He's kind of playing half the time. I don't think they're going to demote him, but I'm kind of in the mindset where I don't know like how much you get from Chourio second half. Like I don't see like a massive turnaround coming. Maybe this offseason, he can work on, maybe being a little bit more patient at the plate, waiting for his pitch. Because right now he's just hitting everything into the ground as well. So there's several kind of approach issues here, but at the same time, zone contact is right around league average. So there's not a big concern there. He's just too aggressive and putting everything on the ground right now. So long term, I still think there's a pretty fun player to be had here with Jasson Chourio, but 2024, I don't know. I'm not seeing it, and it's kind of hard because if you have him right now, it's kind of hard. Like, do you hold on to him? Do you drop him? I think deeper leagues, you probably got to hold. You play in 10 or 12 team league. Maybe it's time to drop him. It's like I said, he's not playing regularly, but long term, I'm still a fan of Chourio.
Yeah, it's just so hard in those really shallow formats, especially if you're playing on like ESPN, who has such a tiny standard roster. There's no or maybe there's one utility, but they've made it really small. It made it hard to fit guys onto your team who aren't really truly like firing on all cylinders. I think if you're in a 3 outfielder league, 10 or 12 teams, there's probably some better options. Once you get into the 15 team NFBC territory, it's like, okay, does anybody have the upside of Chourio on the waiver wire? Maybe, probably not in a lot of cases. So I think it is a little bit format dependent. I still like him in the long term. I think the reason why I still just feel like I don't know a lot about him is, like you said, like he's only 20 years old.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of the time, like we mentioned earlier, we just expect these guys to come up and just, hit the ground running. But it's about the hardest thing you can do is hit a baseball. And we've seen that from a lot of these guys this season. Somebody we haven't really seen hit any baseballs this season is Noelvi Marte. I thought it was kind of hilarious when they were asking him like a week or so ago, and he's like, "I have no idea how I got the steroids in my system. Maybe it was something I ate." It's like, all right, like I don't know about that. My main question though with Marte is, do we think that there was, and we can't really know this, but do we have to kind of regress our expectations a little bit, thinking that maybe the production was bolstered by PEDs? Is that anything that we have to really worry about, or are you thinking that Marte can hit the ground running and do the things we were always expecting from him?
I think you got to at least have it in the back of your mind. I don't think we can entirely dismiss it, but at the same time, I don't think it played a big factor because, we were seeing pretty good production from him dating way back to when he was, a 17, 18-year-old kid in the Seattle Mariners organization before he came over in that trade a couple years ago to Cincinnati. So I don't think it was like, oh, this is why he became, a top prospect. I think there's still a lot of skills there. He did bulk up a ton, like heading into, I think it was heading into 2022 or 2023, but it took him a little bit to kind of get used to the new body. So he's struggled a little bit early in that season, but then really turned it on down the stretch. I've been a big Noelvi Marte guy since he was a 17, 18-year-old kid in Seattle. I remember ranking him pretty highly, even when he was still down in the complex level in rookie ball. So, and I drafted a ton of him this year. I think he and Parker Meadows were my two most drafted players, and obviously that has not gone out well because I haven't had Marte yet, and Meadows was absolute junk. So yeah, a couple of regrets there, but you learn. But I still think Marte, my expectations for him have not really changed whatsoever. And obviously, Cincinnati needs that bat because they've had so many guys that are just hurt or suspended, like Marte has. They're without McLean still for another month and a half. Kind of hard to say on that one. Maybe the whole season. Who knows? So waiting to see if they get Encarnacion Strand back. So they could use Marte's bats in the lineup sooner rather than later. And they can always move Candelario from third to first, here to the outfield. They can make it work, or just put him at DH. They got Nick Martini starting at DH. They can make it work. So there's a spot for him when he's back. And I think it's a week and a half from now. I can't remember when the exact date is. I think it was late June sometime. So we're getting closer. And I think if you've been holding on to him, obviously now don't stop holding on to him. And if he was dropped because no one wanted to wait half the season and he still hasn't been picked up yet, I think, do it now. Whether you have, daily, waiver wire or weekly fab, get it done because I still think there's a impactful guy here, a guy that can provide a decent average. He's always had pretty solid contact rates, good power, good speed and that ballpark. There's a lot of a lot of exciting possibilities here with Marte. So yeah, I'm still as in on him now as I was 4 or 5 months ago before the suspension happened.
That's good to hear. And it's funny, like, Nick Martini starting at TH. All the conversations we had in the preseason about the Reds was, where are these guys going to play? There's nowhere to
Yep.
play them. Jonathan India is going to be on the bench because we don't. And now it's like they need people. They need bodies. The fantasy gods always find a way to make that
Yep.
kind of thing work out. But
Yep.
Noelvi Marte, if you're looking for some third base help, not the deepest position, you're looking at 25% rostered on Yahoo right now. Definitely somebody who
That's
could
it.
make an impact. It's kind of a low number.
That's really low.
Yeah. Yahoo can be kind of weird sometimes. Like
Right.
Elliot Ramos went from like 4% to like 75% before I could blink my eyes. David Fry went up from 0 to like 90. And then like Taj Bradley's 40% rostered. And there's just like some really weird ones. But if you are playing on the platform, 3 out of 4 leagues, you're seeing Noelvi Marte sitting there on the wire. And he's eligible to come back on June 27th. So
There you go. Yep.
just over a week from the time you guys are hearing this, you're going to be able to plot them back into your lineups. I have a bunch of draft and hold shares from earlier in draft season, and I think I got one auto draft later on in the year, which was kind of shitty. But we're going to be plugging them back in, hoping for the best here down the stretch. Somebody that actually I didn't know this when I put the sheet together because it just happened this afternoon. But Kyle Manzardo is the next guy we're going to talk about. He got demoted back down to AAA Columbus today. They weren't playing him a hell of a lot, and when they were, it was a 207 batting average, no homers through 82 at bats. I've been a big Kyle Manzardo fan. I thought it was a fantastic move to trade Savali for him. I know that he dealt with some personal stuff last year. I think his mom went through an illness, and maybe that was why his production wasn't quite up to scratch. What he's done in AAA this year has been fantastic. Hasn't really translated to the big league level just yet, but I'm a big Manzardo fan. I don't know if it's going to be this season it comes to fruition, but somebody that you're still interested in long term, Eric?
Yeah, I'm kind of similar line of thinking to you, where I'm not sure, what impact we see from Manzardo this year, but long term, still definitely a believer. And yeah, he was going through some stuff with his mother last year that would weigh on anybody, and the fact that he was able to still play through it, I can't imagine trying to do that myself. So, really kind of explains some of the struggles there that he had, because looking back to what we saw from Manzardo in 2022. What we saw from him, we all saw from him out in the Arizona Fall League last year. He was one of the better hitters out there, and then early on this year in AAA Columbus, that's Manzardo. He's kind of similar to Vinny Pasquantino, where it's a high contact, solid, good but not great power, but a guy that could be hitting 280 plus, in his prime, like 25 home runs and high OBP as well. And that's what we saw from him, in the minor leagues, and even dating back to his, final year or two in college at Washington State. So, and you look at the metrics this year, the surface line, 207, 241, 329, still looking for that first home run, 87 plate appearances. Obviously it doesn't look great, but, under the hood, he was slightly above average quality of contact metrics, 8.3% barrel, 89 EV, 36.5% hard hit rate. Those are decent. They don't blow you away, but those are decent enough. Zone contact was right around league average as well. So there wasn't any like major red flags in terms of metrics under the hood. So it just didn't work out, and they didn't really need him. And obviously, when Joe Ram came back from the paternity list, I was kind of wondering. I'm like, all right, they haven't been playing him. Are they going to move him back down? And that was indeed the case, which I think is a fine move. If you're not going to play him more than once or twice a week, why not just get him the regular reps in AAA? So, yeah, I haven't really soured on him at all. I mean, the bat will need to be there. Obviously, as a first base only guy, that isn't going to provide any speed. But I still very much believe in the bat. The metrics, again, we're solid despite the poor surface line that he had. So yeah, this year probably don't get a whole heck of a lot out of him, but down the road, I think he's still potentially you won't be a stud, but maybe like a back end top 10 first baseman, kind of in like that Nate Lowe kind of range, an Alec Boehm, something like that. I think that's kind of the upside we're looking at here with a Kyle Manzardo.
That makes sense. I wonder what their plan is position wise, because Naylor, I think, is pretty locked in there for them. Is he a long term DH? Does one of them move to the outfield, to a corner outfield spot? Because Naylor, I believe, can play the corner outfield. What do you think they do there?
I mean, he can stand out there. I don't know how well he can play the corner outfield, but I've had that kind of similar thought where it's like they're kind of got a log jam there. But I think it's probably a case where I think you see Manzardo at first more often. I think you see Naylor primarily at DH. They can flip flop off and on. Get some DH reps to the other guy. But yeah, I don't personally see them moving to the outfield. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think either one's a great fit there. And maybe they can make it work with the first base DH tandem. Or maybe they end up trading Manzardo. Who knows? But if they're both still there, yeah, I don't think either one moved to the outfield.
That's fair. As of right now, do you think they won that trade? Would you rather have Manzardo over Savali based on what we've seen?
Long term, yeah. I mean, I think it's still a fair deal. Savali gave Tampa Bay some value last year. Obviously, this year he hasn't been quite as good. But I don't think it was like a slam dunk. Cleveland robbed them. But yeah, I think long term, you look back and you'll be like, yeah, they probably won that deal.
Yeah, I think they did as well. I think it was a nice little buy low opportunity during the downturn there for Manzardo.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Masyn Winn. I've been a huge fan recently. We're talking about those Yahoo roster rates. This one, I mean, I know shortstop is a crowded position, but 36%. I'm just seeing that he was scratched from today's game with an illness, which is not what I want to be seeing. But he's been leading off every single game in June. He's batting nearly 300. He has 8 stolen bases, 4 home runs, sub 20% strikeout rate. There's a lot to like here, I think. But mainly it's batting average off the waiver wire, which is just so hard to come by. I think for right now, like the first thing is you got to pick him up, I think, even in pretty shallow formats. But is this sustainable? Like, am I crazy to say that he should be like 100% rostered? Or like, what are your thoughts on Masyn Winn, you think?
Yeah, he's another one. Kind of what I was saying earlier in the show. Well, he was a decent prospect and was ranked, fairly highly, but not an elite prospect rank. But he's another guy that was near the top of the rookie WRC plus leaders, and you wouldn't expect to see up there at this point in the season as we're nearing the halfway mark here. And yeah, it's a very interesting profile. He doesn't provide a ton of power. He's probably always going to be 8, 10, 12, kind of in that range. Maybe one year he runs in the 15 or something like that. But I think there's a lot of legitimacy to what he's done this year. I mean, and, power, again, the metrics back it up. He's below average power, 30% hard hit, 2% barrel. He can give you much power. But at the same time, he is a good runner. He's a plus runner. He's 80th percentile sprint speed right now. And he's a phenomenal defender. I mean, everybody's just watching him. He's got a cannon for an arm. Like, he's not going to move off his short anytime soon. So that he's going to be at that spot for the foreseeable future. Guy that can give you he's not a burner. He's not going to give you 30 plus steals, but 20, 25 steals, something like that. So if you're getting 10 homers, 20, 25 steals and a good average, you'll take that. And if he's going to stick and lead off, which St. Louis doesn't really have a lot of other leadoff options or really any of the leadoff options.
Yeah.
He's their best fit there. So even with that lineup not being as great as it was a couple years ago, it's still got some bats there. It's still an okay lineup. So maybe he could run into 80, 85 runs scored, something like that. So he's providing, what's not going to wow you. It's valuable. And I think the average is legit. I think he's going to be a high average guy. The contact rates back it up. He's at 86.7% zone, 83.5% overall, low whiff rate. And you mentioned the low strikeout rate as well, under 20%, which is where he was last year as well. So, yeah, I think if you're looking at 280, 10, 20, 25, kind of like that Tommy Edman from a handful of years ago, it's not going to be a top 100 guy, but a guy that you'll be drafting maybe top 150 or so, and maybe as your middle infielder, but not a guy you want as your starting shortstop, but solid middle infielder that can give you a little bit across the board and not really hurt you anywhere. Yeah, I think it's legit, and I think he definitely should be rostered in more leagues than he is right now.
I'm just hoping that when Nootbaar comes back, he doesn't take over that spot at the top of the order and then send Winn back down. I'm hoping, because Nootbaar, I guess, is a little more natural in that spot with the high on base, but I feel like Nootbaar is maybe just a touch overrated to some extent. I don't know, especially from a fantasy point of view. I don't know that he's that great. I don't know. Am I crazy there? Is Nootbaar overrated? I feel like we talk about him so much as a community, but he hasn't really put it together in the big leagues yet.
Yeah, I think he's a little overrated for fantasy. I mean, I think he's one of those better real life players in fantasy. But what I'm kind of hoping is that they leave Winn leading off, and then maybe if you want to throw Nootbaar in the 2, I think he'd be a fine tool hitter. In front of Goldie and the Nolans. I think that'd be fine there. They've had Burleson there, and he's been hitting well. But does that last? You can move him down to move him down to 6th or something like that. So yeah, I do hope I'm there with you that they keep Winn in that leadoff spot even when Newt is back, because he's been doing pretty well and kind of been a sneaky good fantasy asset here this entire season that isn't getting the love that he deserves.
Yeah, like rookies as a whole have been kind of disappointing, but then there are guys like Masyn Winn,
Yep.
and a guy like Jackson Merrill, who I think just gets really, really underappreciated. 7 homers, 9 steals. He's batting 278, only striking out 15% of the time. He's been fantastic. He's also giving you multi eligibility, shortstop and outfield. I think he's really good, and I think that lineup just helps contribute to it. Even though we're not seeing him at the top of it, he's still just that lineup I think is like 4th overall in WRC plus or something, and that's been kind of a benefit to him. 30 runs, 29 ribbies, even from like the 6th through 8th spot in the order. I'm a sucker for a guy who doesn't hurt you anywhere. You get a little bit of everything with Merrill, plus the multi eligibility. I love him going forward, but is this maybe like, I don't know, is this sustainable going forward? Because what he's doing right now is close to like top 100 overall. Is that maybe a peak for him, or is this something you think we can see year in and year out?
Yeah, I don't think it's fluky. I don't think there's like he's playing over his head by any means. Do I think there's another level to be unlocked there? Maybe not. I don't think he's going to be a top 50 player ever or anything like that. I don't think that upside's there. But he was a guy that was always, fairly highly ranked as a prospect, usually a top 50 prospect or so. Even maybe some had him top 25. I think I had him more like in the 30 to 40 range at peak in my own rankings. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in the profile. You look at the Savant page, nothing is like bright red, but he's got a lot of good metrics across the board, like really above average, more often than not in every metric. You look at 7.8% barrel, 44% hard hit rate, 90-mile-an-hour average EV. Those are all a little bit above league average. Contact skills are solid, 87.5% zone, 81.8% overall. I mean, outside of, chase rate's a little high, walk rate's a little low, but not, in dangerous levels either. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to give you a solid, 270 plus average. Maybe he won't be quite as much of an asset in OBP formats, but if you're getting 270 and guy can give you, I think he more so like a high teens home run guy. Maybe he gets in the low 20s here and there and gives you similar speed. The fact that he's at least, contending for 2020 every year, maybe he gets it a couple years, or maybe he's in that 15 to 18 range other years. Yeah, like you mentioned, he just does a little bit of everything across the board that can help you out and doesn't have any major red flags or any categories that he's a zero in either. So kind of one of those sneaky rookies that isn't as flashy as, the Jacksons or Wyatt Langford or even a Ceddanne Rafaela, but it's just solid across the board. And those types of guys always get undervalued, even in San Diego, which a lot of those prospects usually get overvalued. He's always been kind of undervalued. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of legitimacy in what he's doing right now.
Maybe he's considered kind of boring, I guess. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Boring is exactly the word. And again, those guys, yeah, it's not flashy, but like I said, flashy doesn't always win fantasy titles. You know that too, Joe. We need these guys that are boring, quote unquote, to kind of fill out our roster and, give us some stability while other guys are, struggling or hurt. So you need guys like Jackson Merrill to win in fantasy for sure.
Yeah, I've seen it a lot recently with Tyro Estrada getting dropped, to kind of go off topic. Like, he's not getting dropped a lot, but he's down into like the 60 some odd percent range. And it's like, why? He's been good. He has like 40 runs, 40 ribbies, 10 homers. He's just not flashy. He's not exciting. Yep. The lineup around him isn't great. Like, I think people go for that. Like, Orelvis Martinez got at it in a bunch of leagues today. And I like Orelvis Martinez, but I feel like people just see the guy gets called up and they're like, oh, the new hot thing, I got to add him. When there's probably a more valuable player sitting on their waiver wire. I feel like that's something we do a lot of the time. And these boring dudes, quote unquote boring, kind of get left behind for whatever reason. And I guess that's part of the nature of fantasy. We want to make it more fun. But part of the fun is just being patient and riding out those kind of colder stretches. Because Merrill did have a bit of a cold stretch there. But if you held through it, I think you're pretty happy with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been guilty of that as well, and kind of buying into, what I like to call the shiny new toy syndrome. Yeah. Like I had somebody ask me today on, I forget where it was, if it was Discord or Twitter or whatever, if I wanted Orelvis over Nolan Gorman rest of the season. And I'm not a big Gorman guy in general, but I'm like, No, like best case scenario is that Arolvis is Nolan Gorman. So I'd rather take the guy that is already doing it than the guy that might come close to doing it this year. So yeah, we often want to like move on to the next big thing and play the what if game, but sometimes the better things are right there in front of you.
Another guy that kind of fits that bill, who has been, he's a rookie. He has been good, but he's not really that exciting. And therefore his roster rate's kind of low, is Joey Ortiz. Joey Ortiz has been excellent, really. He's batting 277, 6 homers, 4 stolen bases. If you play in an on base percentage league, he's been killing it. Nearly 14% walk rates led to a 381 OBP. I mean, we're talking about a guy with a nearly 850 OPS. He's below 50% rostered. Again, looking at Yahoo, but I don't really understand it. Second and third base eligible. I think he brings a lot to the table, even when maybe a lot of people weren't expecting it this year. I personally wasn't expecting a lot from him, but he's been great, and I feel like people aren't really catching on, and maybe it is that kind of boring thing. It's Joey Ortiz. It's not some flashy prospect. What are your thoughts on him? Do you think what he's doing is sustainable? I think this walk rate might come back down to earth a little bit, but he's looked pretty damn good.
Yeah, no, he absolutely has, and I'm definitely buying in. And I gotta give props and give credit where credit's due. Two people that were in on Ortiz, or at least I don't think anybody was out on Ortiz, but two guys that were in on him way more than anybody else. My partner over on Toolshed, Chris Clegg, ranked him higher than most as a prospect last year, and then Zach Beck as well, who does work over with Clegg at Dynasty Dugout. Has been a huge Ortiz guy for a while. And, he's a Brewers fan too, so that that definitely helps play into his love for Ortiz. But they were both spot on with it. And you look at the metrics for Joey Ortiz, they're just really good basically everywhere. I mean, he doesn't have the gaudy quality of contact metric. He's not going to be a 30 homer guy, but, kind of another guy, like you mentioned, that just does a lot of good across the board and doesn't hurt you in any one area. And then that's Joey Ortiz. And when you get multi-position eligibility with that, second base and third base, which also means corner and middle infield, which I think is extremely valuable. I love those guys. And he does it all. And I was kind of I put this tweet out. It's a couple weeks ago. It was on June 5th. But at the time, Joey Ortiz was the only guy. This is not exactly fantasy stats, but just kind of shows you like it's how good he's been under the hood and how sneaky good he's been. He was the only guy as of June 5th that ranked in the 80th percentile or higher in walk rate, strikeout rate, sprint speed, and bat speed. It shows you that this is a ball player that's going to be pretty good for a long time. Maybe he's never an all-star or a top 50 fantasy guy. But at the same time, could he be a guy that sneaks into some top 100s, ADPs some years? Yeah, I think that's definitely possible. That might be his peak. But could he be a 15 to 20 homer guy that gives you, 10, 11, 12 steals and solid runs and RBI totals with a 270 plus average? Yeah. And I think that could, if he does that one year, he's probably being drafted, back in top 100 the following year. So, a lot of good under the hood here. 80% out of sprint speed. Whiff and K rates are both super low. You mentioned the walk rate's pretty high. Maybe that does regress a little bit, but he just does a lot of good across the board. That Milwaukee lineup is kind of sneaky good as a whole. And yeah, I think he's a guy that's kind of cemented himself into that lineup and is not in any danger of coming out of it anytime soon. So, I liked Ortiz a lot, and I think this is pretty legit.
You got to give props to Milwaukee because I think a lot of people at the time saw the package for Burns and were kind of like, they feel like they could have maybe done a little bit better or whatever. But Ortiz, because he wasn't like one of the top prospects in Baltimore, right? He was like a little bit below the Mayos and the Norbys of the world and the Kierstads, but it looks like they've landed on like a solid piece for their future. And honestly, like I'm not a huge prospect guy. That's why I bring people like Eric on to talk about them and educate me. But I was not expecting this from Joey Ortiz. He's been excellent. I want to talk about a couple of Nationals prospects. You can probably figure out who they are. James Wood and Dylan Cruz. I feel like we kind of talk about them together. I was writing pieces in March saying that James Wood was going to make the opening day roster, and I feel very foolish the fact that he is still yet to appear in a major league game. I don't know what the hell this guy has to prove at this point. 175 WRC plus at AAA this season, 9 homers, 10 stolen bases. Dylan Cruz is running a 121 WRC plus, 5 homers, 15 steals. I think maybe the problem is that Washington's outfield has actually been pretty solid this year, and maybe they don't need that reinforcement. But I think we're running out of reasons why James Wood shouldn't be a big leaguer at this point. I think he's proven everything you can possibly prove. Are we going to see these guys soon enough that it makes sense to start stashing them now for the second half if they're still out there?
I think yes with Wood, and yeah, I think he's at the point now where he's shown you everything you want to see from a minor leaguer and from a guy like an elite minor leaguer and top prospect that he is. And the one question I had on him coming into the season, I mean, we knew the power was there, we knew the speed, athleticism was there, even for his size. Like he's built like a outside linebacker in football, and I'm saying that in a good way. He's big, strong, but also very fast as well. He's a phenomenal athlete, and he can steal some bags. We all kind of thought like, would he steal bags? Yeah, he has. He had 18 last year and 10 this year in just 45 games. But the one question I did have was obviously with these bigger guys, sometimes you can lead, longer levers lead to bigger strikeout rates. Obviously, they have bigger zones. And last year, he had a K rate a little bit above 30%. He had 173 strikeouts in 129 games, and that was a 31.5% K rate. Walk rate was over 10%, so he's still walking a good amount. But this year, walk rate's gone up, and the K rate, even more impressively, has dropped down to 18.3%. It's a 13% drop. That's massive from one season to the next, especially for a guy that went from Double A to Triple A and is facing better competition. So yeah, that was the one question, and he answered it. Like, can he drop the K rate? Yeah, he can. And will it stick? Maybe it goes back up into the mid-20s, but we've seen power hitters in the mid-20s. That's fine. Judges in that range. That's totally fine. So a guy that can provide you 35 plus home runs. I don't think he's gonna be a 30 plus steal guy, but could he be 20, low 20s or so? Yeah, I think he could, or even like this 15 to 20, something like that. And so, yeah, he's the one I think is going to be up this year. I mean, a little delayed because of the injury, but working his way back now. So I do think we see him later in the season. I think we do see Cruz. I think Wood is up earlier and makes the bigger impact this year. Cruz, obviously, I think you could say he's been a little bit of a disappointment compared to expectations of being, the number 2 overall pick and the college career he had at LSU, where he was the best hitter in the country for really 2 full seasons there, his final 2 seasons on campus. This year, it's been solid 274, 343, 446. He's at 11 doubles, 5 bombs, 15 steals, 51 games. But again, kind of underwhelming compared to what you thought he could do. But, I'm a believer in what we saw from him in college, the metrics that really were off the charts with him. So I think if the value on him has dipped in your dynasty league, I think definitely would take advantage of that. I don't think he's like a top 10, borderline top 10 prospect overall for fantasy. But this year, while I do think he could debut, I don't think you see him enough to make like a big impact this year. So I think more so 2025 is the year where you start getting some contributions from him for fantasy. So this year, yeah, definitely Wood, maybe Cruz, but yeah, Wood for sure.
What do you think? Is it going to be in the next couple of weeks before the All-Star break, late September? Like what? I'm just. It should have happened at any moment. I guess we have no real way of knowing. But your best guess, if there's a certain date or certain time period for Wood.
I think if he didn't go on the IL, we could have already seen him by now. But I think this gives him a little bit of a built-in excuse to maybe keep him out until like late August or so. And I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong on that. But I can see them. Obviously, the Nationals, probably aren't going to be postseason contenders. We know that. So I can see them kind of keeping him underneath, kind of like what happened with Corbin Carroll before his debut and others that they kept him under the 130 threshold to keep rookie eligibility for the following year. So I think they could go that road, but also they've called up guys aggressively before. So I think you can see him anywhere between. They'll give him a few weeks to get reacclimated back into the lineup and kind of start mashing again. So I don't think we see him before. If it was before the All-Star break, I'd be a little shocked. But then again, it could be as late as late August or so. But we're gonna see him this year. It's just a matter of, is it like mid-July or is it late August?
I guess that'll really dictate where we see him go in 2025 drafts as well. If he has like a 1 month stretch where he has like 7 homers and 5 steals or something, are we going to see him as like, is he going to be the guy next year that's a top 50 pick? Is he going to be the next Langford and Carroll? If he does, I think there's a possibility if he comes up and does really well. And let's say like in a world where he doesn't debut this year for whatever reason, then where do you think we would see him go in drafts? Because that's still with the unknown factor. Like if Washington pulls some crap and we don't actually see him at all, is he a top 100 pick, 150?
I kind of think he could be in the similar range where Langford was before the hype really took off on Langford, and
Okay.
he moved up draft boards. I think he started like if you did like some drafts and before the calendar flipped to 2024, we were doing those early DCs where he was like 150 ish. I think that's where Wood could be if he does debuts. Everyone knows the upside is there that he could be an impact guy, but he's still a rookie and guy that hasn't debuted yet. So yeah, I think if he debuts and hits at least reasonably well, doesn't have to tear it up reasonably well, I think he's top 100 pick next year easily. Doesn't debut, probably more in that 150 range or so.
I think that makes sense. I'm really, really wondering what the hell's wrong with Jasson Dominguez. This one is kind of scary because whenever you see undisclosed placed on injured list, especially for somebody who did just have Tommy John surgery, I know he's not a pitcher, but you still don't want to see it. How scared are we here with Jasson Dominguez? There was already not really a spot for him. That's why he got sent down initially, I believe. Like he probably should be on the big league roster. I think it's kind of weird that Alex Verdugo, of all people, was kind of blocking Jasson Dominguez from being in the big leagues, even though Verdugo's been pretty good. But there wasn't a spot for him. Now he's hurt. We don't even know what the hell the injury is. Is Dominguez worth holding on to in most leagues at this point? He's on a third of Yahoo rosters. It feels like a bit of a fool's errand to kind of hope that he's going to provide fantasy value in redraft in 2024 at this point.
Yeah, it's tough because he was charging hard for that spot. Like he was going to make a difficult decision for the Yankees because even their worst outfield, like Verdugo, like he's still been okay. He hasn't been bad enough to lose his job either. So
Yeah.
it was going to be interesting to see how that played out, over the next few weeks because Dominguez was mashing in the minors on his rehab assignment. So, but the last I heard was that he was awaiting MRI results. Maybe it sounded like it's a side oblique type thing. So I'd hold on to him for at least for a few days if you can. Just to see like, all right, is it minor and he's it's just like a minor speed bump and he's gonna be out maybe a week. Because if that's the case, I think we still see him, in July, August or so. But if you're like, all right, he's gonna be out a few weeks or a month, 5 weeks, something like that, then if that news comes out, all right, I think it's time to drop him because at that point they probably ease him back, just given he's coming back already from the Tommy John, and then they don't want to rush him. They don't have like a massive glaring hole. They've been I think a top 3 or 4 offense this year. Obviously Judge and Soto and Stanton's back hitting dingers. Volpe's been good, so they haven't really have we need to get this guy in the lineup, kind of like Cincinnati, who's been struggling. But yeah, I think you hold on to him for a few days, wait and see what the MRI results are, and how long he's gonna be out. If it's a few days, a few weeks, and then make your determination there. But yeah, for now, I'd hold and wait to see what happens.
It's so tricky, especially in those leagues with like no IL or when you only have 1 or
Yep.
2 IL spots, shallow formats. It's so tough. Like I'm still holding him. Most of my shares are draft and hold, so I don't have to make the tough choice. But
Right.
I wonder how serious this is, and if he did re-aggravate something in the arm there. I don't know. I wish they would just tell us. I don't know why they do this undisclosed thing. Why don't they just tell us? Is there any real reason why teams do that? I don't know. It's just so aggravating in all sports, really. But I don't know why they can't just tell us in baseball. It's not a contact sport. It's why the whole Corbin Carroll thing has kind of drove me crazy this year.
Right.
Maybe he has a shoulder injury, maybe not, but it seems like he does. Why wouldn't you just be more transparent about it? Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like there's something there, and I don't know why teams just aren't more open with us.
Yeah, it is frustrating, and from what I've seen, I hope I'm wrong here, but I feel like usually when they're being more tight-lipped about it, usually is not a good thing. So
Yeah.
they're like, if it was super minor, they want to reassure the fan base, even just their own fans, like, hey, he's gonna be okay, he'll be out for a few days or whatever it is. But if they're tight-lipped about it and don't want to really say much about it, oh yeah, it's undisclosed or we're awaiting an MRI result or something like that. It's like, all right, that kind of seems like all right. There's some concern there on their front, and they don't want to kind of get their fans all up and tizzy about it. So I hope I'm wrong because even as a Red Sox fan, you're another AL East fan here of a different team. He's a fun player. I've seen him live in AA. I think his skill set leads to potential fantasy greatness, especially in that ballpark with his left-handed power. Yeah, a lot of fun there, but yeah, maybe this is not the year for him. And hopefully next year he can just stay healthy and start. Even though we're not going to like it when they're facing our teams, but we get some fantasy shares of him. We'll like that. So yeah, he's definitely become a tough one to roster right now.
Yeah, like we said a few times today, it's kind of been a tough year for rookies slash prospects as a whole, but hoping that next year looks a little bit more like last year, where we saw like 100% hit rate. It felt like, I know it really wasn't 100% hit rate, but it felt like it over the last couple of years. And we kind of got brought back to earth with what we saw with Wyatt Langford and Jackson Holliday, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
All these rookies getting drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds, probably not that wise, and maybe next year we'll be a little more cautious. Eric, I really appreciate you joining me today, man. I kept you longer than I anticipated, and I know it's late, but really appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Joe. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and yeah, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Always, man. I want to give you one more chance just to let everybody know where they can find your work and everything you got going on right now.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it these days. I still call it Twitter. Eric Cross 04. I'm writing over at FTN, 2 articles a week there. RotoBaller, a couple articles a week there as well. Prospects to stash over there, pitching planners, a lot of fun, some redraft, some dynasty, kind of a little bit of everything. And then my Patreon, which is toolshedfantasy.com. I got all my prospect and dynasty rankings over there, plus daily write-ups, which is always a lot of fun to do. I know you do them. You do a great job as well. They're always a lot of fun just to kind of recap the previous day's events or the same day's events. And yeah, Toolshed podcast. Yeah, doing 2 episodes a week there with Chris Clegg, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. Almost at the halfway mark, and still got a lot of season left to go.
Lots of fun left to happen, of course. Make sure you're keeping up with everything Eric has going on. One of the best, specifically for Dynasty. If you're playing Dynasty, you're not following Eric, you're doing it wrong. Lots of great stuff out on Twitter. And of course, check out the Patreon. Looking for my Patreon, you can find a link in the description of the episode. Joe Orico 99 over on Twitter. Eric Cross 04. We're going to be back again tomorrow talking about Tuesday's action, talk about what stood out to, I was about to say to us, but I'm not going to bother Eric again to come back on so soon as tomorrow. I will pick his brain again later on, and hopefully we'll get him back on for our trade deadline show. But I'm going to wrap up there. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. But until then, take care and have a great night.